we are recording. This is Performance Media episode 19, and today we're talking about everything getting your customers to take action at scale. We're going to tease, we have a clip at the end where we're going to be talking about the minimum viable marketing team to go from $1 to $100 million. But first, we want to talk about a mismatch a lot of service businesses have, especially marketing agencies with the clients that they're serving. So Austin, do you want to start with that topic?
Yeah, totally. This is, I guess, not a case study. What would it be called? Historical example? I don't know, something like that. But we've seen this a ton, so I can speak more generally as well as specifically. But as you grow your business, okay, actually, I'm going to start with this. This is a great quote that I had a friend once say, who's an influencer, which is like, you are 100% solely responsible for your followers, who they are. Mm-hmm. And if they eat you later in time, that's of your doing. And so I think about it very similar with an eComm business working with a service provider. If you're a service provider and you're not vetting and really getting down to, is this exactly the right client for us? And later in time, it comes back at you, then that's completely on you. And so I think what we're going to get into is there seems to be a really big disconnect or mismatch between many service providers and the e-commerce business or whatever the business using the service provider is. And typically, in my opinion, it's clouded because of money. It's clouded because of the bigger contract. It's clouded because it's another client that you can add. And it's not necessarily because of the business that you're working with and the contract and the scope of work and the proposal and the XYZ.
Yeah. No, I know. And we've seen this for service end. I think this does apply, which I'm going to get into in a sec, for even CPG companies or physical products companies. But yeah, for service companies specifically, I think the biggest problem we ran into is just that if we're taking on anyone or working with anyone that's not ideal, we're not learning anything that we can apply to the rest of our client list in order to get them better results. So it's almost like a one-off that's not really feeding the rest of the business, and it's not feeding anyone else we're serving. And I know that I've seen this with a lot of physical goods companies as well. I know one that comes to mind is when people are trying to serve different channels, like for example, retail accounts and direct to consumer accounts. And they're building their product, like their list of SKUs for these different ideal customers they have in mind, a retail account versus their direct consumers. I've seen a lot of mismatches for what people are focusing on. Like for example, one I've seen is people trying to fill like the end item, I'm totally blanking on the name, at a store at the end of an aisle, and trying to have a good product split in a store just to be able to fill that, and expanding product lines just to fill that out more versus looking at across all their sales channels, how that's going to affect it. So I do see this in physical products where people are kind of like trying to serve two masters, but I see it even more in service businesses where instead of having one or two types of customers you're serving, you might, I know when we were starting, we were going after like 20 and talking to, every type of business there is, and talking to other service providers in this space, agencies that focus on retention marketing, agencies that focus on building sites. I constantly see them switching back and forth between different ideal customers. Sometimes as little time between these switches or these pivots for their business is 6 months. They'll be serving a different client. So I think really thinking about this and creating kind of a roadmap for who you're going to serve, both for physical products companies and service businesses, is like super critical to getting better results over time, like having that at least linear increase in the quality of your product.
Yeah, and it also is like super important if you're an e-commerce business going after a service business, make sure they have case studies that are similar to what you're doing, what you're selling, because otherwise you may be getting, like I've heard this recently many times. Someone's like, "Oh yeah, they've been really big in the B2B law space, and they're going to help us with our e-commerce strategy." And I'm like, oh my God, you don't even understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Yes, because they're successful at selling legal help to CTOs or CFOs in companies. They're great to sell your knickknack online. No, that's not true at all. It's actually ridiculous as an insight.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Even the difference between direct to consumer for like a large, like I know one of the examples we're thinking of is like a large ticket price, like one-off purchase, might have accessories, but it's like a large one-time purchase versus something that's ideally going to be a recurring purchase, like a lower cost consumable product. Like the difference between way that you're going to sell that product and the retention you're going to use and the tech stack you're going to use, it's probably going to be all completely different. So
yep,
it's just going to be limited what you can apply across those different business models. Obviously, the fundamentals of marketing stay the same, but all the implementation details are going to change between those. So if someone's not an expert in exactly the same business model, it's probably not going to be a fit for either side.
Yeah, and I think that flows directly into the second part of the convo, which is like the minimum viable team to get to 100 million, 0 to 100 million in revenue.
Yeah, the minimum viable marketing team. Yeah, I love this one because the people that you are going to need to hire really are going to need to be coming in already as experts at all these levels, because as you scale and you're switching out people to be more appropriate for their position as the company scales, you just aren't always going to have time to train someone in-house. I think that's ideal in a lot of cases, but for these key hires that we're going to talk about, it's not ideal. So what we're going to go over is kind of what we see for a consumer packaged goods company that has a direct-to-consumer component and is looking to eventually get into retail. What's kind of the ideal marketing team to start with at around the $1 million mark, assuming you're a startup that's bootstrapped and you've kind of made it to where you feel like you can start scaling. You have some type of team in-house where a lot of people are probably doing a lot of different things. Where do you start and how does that team grow? What's the essentials in terms of hires that you're going to have? So we're going to start with basically, Austin, you can go over the positions, but we're going to start with someone that there has to be someone in your team that knows how to position the product and your company in the marketplace. Like what category of products are you in and how are you positioning against who you think are your competitors or who your customers think you're competitors. Someone who understands retention marketing. It's probably going to be email and SMS from most CPG companies. And then someone that understands analytics and tracking and putting your tech stack together. So all the tech you're using is talking back and forth.
Yeah, totally. So the first person who their ascension plan is to CMO. They may already be the CMO, but their ascension plan gets them to that position. Is also, so they're not only dealing with positioning and understanding competitor markets and product market match, but they're also like the main driver of your marketing strategy and your go-to-market strategy and the technicals. They're versed at the technicals of understanding of like paid traffic and organic traffic acquisition, but they're not, let's say, the top 0.1% expert that you would get working with someone at an agency or hiring specifically for a medium.
So they can kind of like create the channel roadmap to work with these like subject matter experts.
Totally. Yeah. It's the reason that we have the minimum spend threshold for a client that we're going to work with, because we know if they're already at X point, they likely have had someone on their team who either was managing it at one point or overseeing another agency or marketer that got them to this point. And so these people are able to build landing pages, understand offers, go through offer testing. They can play around on Facebook and Instagram advertising, Google ads, maybe TikTok ads nowadays. These people can develop and design a marketing strategy and understand the importance of sourcing creative, of developing landing pages and offer testing, of SEO, of organic influencer marketing. Like they understand the bigger picture, so they know what to put the time, attention, and focus on instead of things like redesigning the site or changing the brand name or doing packaging updates, things like that, which are like, they're fine. They don't move the needle. You could have the ugliest site and the best marketing and you'll win compared to the person who has the most beautiful branded site with horrible or no marketing. They'll never win. You build it, they will not come unless you tell them where to go.
Yeah, I want to add in one caveat too, is you said that they won't move the needle. We don't mean to say these things aren't important. We just mean to say that until they become bottlenecks, they're less important than the other things that are going to drive the business forward. Now, at the point these things become bottlenecks, of course, they're necessities. But for most businesses, a lot of this is more logistics and not necessary immediately. They're going to become bottlenecks at some point, which you should definitely keep in mind, but they're not usually immediately the priority.
Exactly. And then, okay, so we have number one, which is almost a marketing. Oh, you have something?
No, we have one. You're good.
Yeah, we have one. He's marketing manager, digital marketing strategist, CMO later in time. Depends on kind of how you want to define that role. Number two is someone who specializes in retention marketing. LTV, customer development, customer success. Basically, the first role is the external, driving customers to the business. The second role is understanding how to, once customers are part of the business, they're happy, they're getting what they want, and they continue to come back. And so this person is skilled in email marketing, SMS, because they go together nowadays. So you need both. They're skilled in understanding upsells, cross-sells, which products after someone enters, let's say, your ecosystem via X product, which product comes next, and how do you walk the buyers through that? They are understanding and helping develop customer success. So that would be customer support at the beginning. And of course, they move out of that pretty quickly, but at least developing the database of concerns and questions that they're getting from the people they're talking to on a day-to-day. And these people are also taking surveys. They are mining data based on testimonials and trying to understand more appropriately why a customer is buying, what they're buying things for, and how frequent they're buying things. So you can begin the process of using position 3 most appropriately to determine how much position 1 can actually spend to acquire people. And they all flow together at that point.
Yeah, and for the second one, I think for most CPG companies that are doing direct to consumer, this person is probably going to be almost totally focused on the problem of how do you get someone who's purchased once or twice to have purchased 3, 4, or more times, become a recurring customer, ideally, if we're talking about something like consumables. Now, at this point, before we get into the third position, I know we're going to go over tracking and analytics. One thing we haven't mentioned is someone who is going to be help with conversion. So we talked about the first position, who's thinking about the person who's overall marketing strategy, thinking about positioning in the marketplace. And then we've talked about someone who's working on retention marketing. You definitely want to have someone on the team who's working on conversions, optimizing pages. At this point, if someone's at $1 million in business, you almost have to have some success with some of your landing pages. So there's a lot of different ways that you can hire internally or hire an agency to help you with conversion rate optimization if you haven't already. But we're going to save that for the end. And we're going to get into the third position, which most companies are lacking prior to scaling, which is someone doing tracking or analytics.
Yeah. I mean, this is, if person 1 is I guess I'm going to use military terminology, like a missile system. Person 3 is the navigation. It's like, where are we going? Yeah. Where are we going to actually hit? And then person 2 is like, I don't know how person 2 fits into this. It's a bad analogy. But ultimately, how we've always thought about it is like, literally, there's someone guiding where to shoot, and there's the shooter. And number 1 is the shooter, and number 3 is the guide. And so within your business, if you do not have someone who understands installing tracking scripts and making sure GA4 is up to date and making sure you've got some other form of attribution software and that everything is talking and nothing is breaking, then you're not going to be able to scale. And that's the hard truth, is like analytics, attribution, and the technical setups of tracking scripts, apps, Shopify, everything is so crucial now that I can't tell you how many times I've seen even some of the best accidentally mess something up, and for 2 days there's no sales coming in, or you can't figure out what's going on with upsells or whatever, and it completely hinders the ability of the person who is the first employee / owner / whatever that we talked about. And if you didn't have that person on the team who knew how to fix it, you're contracting out, you're trying to figure out, you're talking to Shopify help, whatever. To have someone in-house who can set up everything tracking and really make sure your business is actually running as efficiently as you want it to is crucial.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get help, whether you're going to bring someone in-house immediately or get someone external. At this point, if you're starting at $1 million, I would say that somebody that knows marketing strategy and positioning, that's always the first position you want to have in-house. There should already have been someone in the company, if it's at $1 million, that understands your positioning in the marketplace. But one of the problems I see a lot is companies that are wanting to scale. Not only do they need subject matter experts, but they actually even if they don't say this explicitly, they need someone to kind of reposition their business or their product and basically find a new, larger market where they can keep acquiring customers at the same cost and then acquire, 10x the amount of customers they currently have. That's going to be tough. If you haven't figured that out in your business and there's no one on marketing that understands your positioning to find those people, you can definitely get help externally with that, but it's not going to be someone that will be easy to bring in. And if you're at $1 million, someone that's qualified to reposition your business and your products is probably going to be a really expensive hire. And it's probably not going to make sense at that point. It probably makes more sense to just go back to the drawing board and try to figure that problem out. So you really need to have someone like that in-house. Out of the next two positions, retention marketing and analytics, it's kind of a toss-up. I would almost say that the analytics is more important because you can't track anything. But the reason we are talking about retention marketing and analytics and tracking before we're talking about conversion rate optimization or bringing someone who's doing media buying in-house instead of an agency is that the person doing retention marketing is going to be the one talking to your customers the most, setting up your emails, setting up any surveys that you're having, setting up customer discovery calls. If you have customer service reps, sending out emails that are asking for customer discovery calls, they're going to be the ones leading all that discovery process with your customers to start to build qualitative data about your customers that you can recycle back into your positioning. And of course, if you don't have someone that's doing tracking and analytics, you're not really going to understand what your data is telling you, or you're not going to be sure if it's accurate. So for us, those are kind of crucial before you bring in someone who's just a hardcore expert on conversion rate optimization or a hardcore expert on buying, media buying for the specific channels that you're having success in right now. Now that'll change as you scale, which is what we're going to talk about, but that's kind of like the basics. And the easy way you could do that is if you have someone in-house that understands your positioning, you could just make sure that you have someone, either an agency that's going to work with you on like your full lifecycle marketing, including email and SMS and also customer discovery, or try to get someone in-house that is going to start working on that problem of figuring out who are your customers, what can you do to get them to repeat purchase, and how's that going to affect your positioning. And then the last one, analytics. That is probably going to be the hardest hire for most people at this stage. I would say if you can get an agency that's providing one of the other services that can help you with that has developers on staff, that could be really helpful. If you can find someone that's a good at analytics engineering, has set up all types of tracking, can get all your tech stack to be talking together and working, and you're confident in that person at that level, you can get them at the right price, definitely go for it. They're going to help scale your team to the point where, you have enough money to bring in someone that's like a full CTO and is beyond qualified to integrate any tech that you get. So Austin, do you want to go over kind of how that might change at like the $10 million mark?
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the first thing is once you're hitting around 10 million, the simplicity starts to fade away a lot more and more within the business. And you start to need people who are specialized. So nowadays, businesses can get to 10 million without having a crazy paid traffic spend. I've seen that quite often. So at that rate, we're trying to scale beyond our initial 1,000, 10,000 true fans, buyers, whatever. We've hit the inner circle, depending on the product, right? If you have like a $20,000 product, then 10 million a year is actually not crazy at all customer wise. But if we're talking about, $50 to $75 AOV, now we're trying to break the circle of like, oh, these are all the people who are just interested in our product already. Now we're trying to reach people who are interested in the topic, category, whatever that our product exists in. And so for that CMO or that position 1 digital marketing strategist guy, they already know the basics of all the things that you're going to hire for or bring on for. And this is where we actually see a lot of people pull in an agency that specialize in, let's say, Facebook, Google, TikTok ads, who actually also, like Ian was saying, do have on staff analytics devs or somebody who can help set up and specify tracking for these mediums. Because going from 10 to 100, it becomes infinitely more important to be able to understand when person A buys through ad B, what is their worth in a month, 2 months, 3 months? And do we have enough money to scale and hold that 30, 60, 90-day period to get the money back to put into scaling? So this is where, oftentimes we see person one is moving up. They're pulling in an agency or a media buyer and a landing page builder, or someone who can basically be the creative dev. I don't know. Would you call them a dev still, Ian? I mean, they are a dev if they're building the page, but they're not like
for the pages. Dev. Yeah, a designer. It's just someone working as a designer that understands whatever CMS you're using. So if it's like for most of the CPG companies we're working with, Shopify, someone that understands Shopify development work and design work, just so that they can create, take a mock-up or an idea from someone on the team that's creative and turn that into a landing page. It can be a drag and drop designer or someone that's actually a full-on developer.
Yeah, exactly. Because the step one person is now focusing more on offer testing, more on the ideas behind why we're creating new landing pages, and the overall strategy and how our brand is appearing to the general consumer, not just the specialized consumer who's already looking for this type of product. Now we have to cast that wider net and go, hey, this is our product. It's perfect for you. I know you were using this product, or I know you were thinking about buying this product, or just thinking about this as an overarching issue. This is why you should be using our product. So that's person one moving up, agency or media buyer, and then someone who can build landing pages and get offer testing going. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have anything to add for
these people that Austin's talking about, if you're having a media buyers or specialist or an agency and then a landing page builder, they're probably going to be working for that CMO, and the person using the marketing strategist or CMO role, they're going to be working with that person likely directly to be testing offers and driving traffic to those offers. The next person, the retention marketing person, if this is someone in-house, they've either been trained at this point and they've gotten a lot better at their job, or you're using an agency and you may have to switch agencies. I know for a lot of agencies, there is a crossover point here we've seen where a lot of retention marketing or email agencies will build out everything you need for email marketing, help you strategize around it. But a lot of agencies that work with the 8-figure to multi-8-figure plus range companies are very different in the service they deliver from email marketing agencies that work with 7 to 8-figure companies or even smaller. So a lot of times that may have to change. If it's somewhat in-house, you just have to make sure that they're ready to work a lot harder, possibly work with someone under them to help them build out, like test new segments, test new offers that are going out via email, test new info gathering requirements like surveys that are going out over email, be able to keep track of all this, and then also start to get into a little bit more of the data analytics around retention marketing, which is going to get way more complex as we go to 10 million. And then of course, to be a whole nother level when you get to 10 million. So you just have to make sure that whoever's handling that, whether it's an in-house hire or it's an agency, is ready to scale with you past 10 million in the multi 8-figure zone. Cause like retention marketing is going to get way more complex. I mean, everything's going to get more complex. So they just have to be the right person.
Yeah. And at that point too, you're going to be whomever is head of retention is going to be managing likely creatives as well. Because the branding, the messaging has to be very on point for who your customer is. And you'll begin to need, especially for email and SMS, many more graphics that stylize the brand, that pull people in. So it becomes a bottleneck, of course, if that isn't under this team, because I think if the person is getting pulled in multiple directions, then you often see people just end up neglecting retention when it's like the most important area of the business as you start to scale, because you already bought these customers. They already said yes. So keep them saying yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see a lot of people hiring graphic editors to build products or different materials basically that you're sending out to current customers instead of just pumping out things to attract new customers. Yep. The next one, anyone that's doing tracking or integrations for your whole tech stack, like everything else, this is going to get a lot more complex. So a lot of the same advice is for whoever's handling retention marketing. The person just needs to be qualified to handle the increased complexity. So if this is someone you hired Upwork to help you with some technical details, you may need to have a discussion with them about working more closely with you, being on a retainer, doing continuous work on some kind of retainer basis. And also this has to be someone that's responsive enough to do work. when you're going to 10 mil plus, especially if you're using paid acquisition, you can't have things go down for 72 hours and have your tracking be off or your tech broken, which we've seen a lot. So this is probably the time to start thinking about someone in-house. So we've seen this work a lot of different ways. A lot of companies we work with have a little bit of redundancy in this aspect, in that, they might have someone who's doing some of the development for pages that understands how to integrate a lot of your tech stack so that they can help troubleshoot things. And they also might have someone focused on tracking for ads and just the analytics platforms, like we always recommend. We're going to get to this at the 100 mil mark, but if you already have the capital for it, definitely worth thinking about bringing in someone who's a CTO, someone who's worked integrating tech platforms, that's either a full-on developer or has at least done this for these types of companies many times and can work with developers, because it's probably going to be necessary. There's going to be some level of customization for some of these platforms at this point.
Yeah. I mean, you
amazing.
said it perfectly.
Do you want to go into the 100 mil and what changes at that point?
Yeah, 100 amazing. Mil. So I think
road to 100 mil, we should say, caveat.
Totally, road to 100 mil. I mean, this kind of depends too if you're going for a sale or if you're going for, like, if you just want to get to 50 mil, wipe the hands clean, get a VC to acquire you. It's a bit different than if you're trying to build out the team, because as Ian and I have seen many times, like when teams are acquired, when a company's acquired, every VC, equity, private equity, whatever, they all have their own way of now repackaging your company and kind of turning over what's already inside of there. Mm-hmm. But on the path there, it starts to look a lot different. So the paid traffic team has a creative team now. Well, the CMO has a paid traffic team. They've had a marketing. They've got channel-specific agencies or expert agencies who handle multiple channels. They've got an in-house marketing manager who can also oversee all channels to understand what's going on internally within the team, and what the agencies are doing. So, like, as a double check, basically. They've got a creative team assigned to cold traffic acquisition and positioning that is always working on new creatives, videos for ads, but not only for ads, but also for social media, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. And they've got maybe 2 now, probably, landing page builders, or people who can actively get things up within, 72 to, I don't even know how many, 148 hours, 3 to 6 days.
Yeah. New offers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes a lot more paramount to be able to test quickly and efficiently, and to make sure that the person testing these mediums has all of the resources that they need to get this going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way we usually see this for kind of your customer acquisition marketing is, like Austin mentioned, whatever channels you're operating on, if these aren't, they may be in-house, in which case the person leading in-house for any of your channels should understand your overall marketing and be their own marketing manager for their channels. If it's an agency, they should have someone in the agency that understands your marketing plan, that's more or less a marketing manager for that channel, like an acquisition manager for that channel, for each one of these channels. So if you have a separate agency for all the major channels you're on, they need to have someone that's essentially a marketing manager for that, or someone who's qualified to do it that's running the traffic. If it's in-house, they of course should be their own acquisition manager. And that's cold traffic. Each one of those needs to have some way to, as Austin mentioned, get creative assets to be testing within, whatever time period you're comfortable with, 3 days, 4 days, 6 days, whatever it is. They need to be able to do that. So if you don't have that capacity in-house and you're not going to hire creative, any sort of like creative production team in-house or build your own, you need to be working with people that have that. Otherwise, you're going to have to hire that in-house. And that's usually a production manager, someone that's capturing for each one of those media, whether that's like photo and video, and then at least one editor for those media, photo or video. That's kind of the minimum.
And a copywriter.
Yeah, in-house. So if you're not working with agencies, you would need that. Separately, there's usually a team that's handling organic social media, which we're not going to go super deep into right now. Probably save that for a future podcast. And then there's also going to be a team just handling everything else across paid or organic channels that's just working with in concert with your retention marketing. So this can be someone just doing remarketing on paid channels that's just following up on the offers that you're sending out via email and SMS, but it's going to be a much lower volume usually of spend and a much lower volume of testing. So it's separate departments. You can think of that like the customer acquisition that follows up with retention marketing, organic, and then your cold traffic testing end of your customer acquisition. The biggest difference I see at this point for companies going from 10 to 100 billion is that the person that was in that CMO role is now going to need to have a direct consumer marketing manager, someone that's basically a head of e-commerce or a growth manager, as we see it normally called in companies that are doing a lot of performance marketing, a lot of cold traffic. And then you're going to have someone that's a head of retail marketing. They may have sales reps under them that are working to get new retail accounts. But the biggest difference I see is the CMO, person in charge of positioning the brand, is not going to be able to handle all the implementation details of how you're positioning for retail versus D2C. And they're going to need someone leading those efforts who have the actual implementers and their teams under them. It's like a massive change for that CMO or marketing strategist role.
Yep. 100%.
That's a lot of words.
Yeah. The second, retention marketing and what gets built out there.
Yeah. Oh, man. So I feel like there's a lot here because this is where the tracking and analytics and retention marketing, pretty much everyone on the team starts to work much more closely with the tracking and analytics. For retention marketing, you're going to be starting to analyze your user cohorts, your user segments. This is where a lot of companies want to have some way to ingest all their data and then be able to visualize it in a number of different ways that they want to look at. And this can vary company by company. It depends on their marketing strategy, but usually the retention marketer is going to be the person wanting to look at that data. The simplest way that you need to be looking at this data is just your cohorts of users and at what point they're repeat purchasing, how often they repeat purchasing, and when they start to really become, repeat consumers, and what percentage of your overall customers are becoming habituated to using your product. So this can be someone that's usually what we like to do is just take a look at the last 3 to 12 months, who are the highest frequency purchasers and what different cohorts of high frequency purchasers do we have. So in the last 12 months, amount of users that have purchased 12 times, 11 times, 10 times, what does that look like? How are we keeping track of it? And how are we starting to progress those users to purchasing more within that time period? That's kind of the job of retention marketing. And as you can imagine, at this size of a business, it requires quite a bit of data to wrap your head around some of those trends.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, these two kind of blend at this point. And then you also have like tracking. The analytics team starts to also blend more with the CFO or the finance team, because you start to begin to need very clear understanding with like 98% accuracy of 98% confidence that the data that you're getting is accurate, because then you begin to map out, okay, cool, the scaling of the acquisition team is solely dependent on the P&L / analytics / attribution platforms that we have, and understanding that this data that we're getting is processed efficiently so we can see what these cohorts are worth. And if we need to, before being able to scale paid traffic, retention has to be able to bump up their ability to convert people after 30, 60, 90 days. So everybody starts to work together way more efficiently here, I would say, because everybody literally depends on one another in order to move the bar forward.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great point. How retention marketing, analytics, and tracking all have to now be able to plug into your finance. For most companies, they have a really good, relatively clear picture of how their acquisition costs are affecting their P&L. They don't have a clear way to connect their acquisition costs to their retention marketing and their customer lifetime value to their P&L with any sense of clarity about whether or not the tracking they're used to calculate customer acquisition and overall customer lifetime value and trajectory of changes in customer lifetime value is going to affect their P&L to get like a reasonably accurate sense, like directional sense of where their forecast is going based on their current P&L model. And this is like just a nice to have at all these other scales at 1 million or 10 million, but it's pretty much critical on the way to 100 million. If you don't have someone that's like really on the pulse of this, I mean, I've never seen a company growing towards 100 million that doesn't have someone that really understands this. So figuring out who on your team that's going to be or becoming that person is going to become critical if you're thinking about going to this level of scale.
Yeah, because then you have also inventory management. You have picking and packing. Like the analytics team has to be really well versed in every single cost that is being associated with the product and looking for better solutions. Cool. Okay, this shipper, this pick and package 3PL is costing $7 per order over X pounds. Can we get it down to 6? And if we can, then okay, cool. The acquisition team can start to scale more. Like it just becomes such a cohesive thing that, yeah, the numbers have to be damn near, 100% precision, at least from spend to like blended, a blended ROAS or a blended model to understand profit and loss based on which channels are the most efficient for marketing.
Yeah. 100%. And I think the only hack I've seen for this is companies that have hired accountants, usually as their head of growth, that's working with someone that understands retail costs and can plug those into their P&L and is crunching their P&L and just staring at it. Someone who really enjoys large Excel files or a similar way that you're tracking costs and is already good at it. That's the only hack I know of for understanding this if you're not going to learn it. So yeah, wow, that's a lot. What else?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you get there, you can get anywhere.
Yeah. Then you'll have investors telling you how to keep scaling, and you won't have to listen to podcasts. Yeah. So it won't even matter.
Yeah, you have retail teams. You'll have everyone. It'll be everywhere. I'll be using your product.
We'll be using the product on the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's like a good 20,000, 30,000 foot overview of kind of some of the changes that we see. Obviously, there's a lot more detail in all of these, and we'll be bringing on people who are experts in each one of those areas to talk about that stuff. But that's like a good overview. I think the last one we wanted to talk about is if people still aren't sure, I think we got like 5-10 minutes, why they would need third-party tracking, why that's so critical. This is separate. This is regardless of the size of your company. What's so critical about this? I know you really did a post on it. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason that privacy is being pushed everywhere is because no one trusts Facebook, Google, I guess Meta, Google, Amazon, Apple, TikTok. Because no one trusts them, the platforms don't trust each other either. And because the platforms don't trust each other, the data being sent from each platform to something like your website using just the platform data is becoming more and more inaccurate over time. I've been seeing some crazy divergences lately in Facebook where I'm like, this doesn't even make sense that it's saying these conversions are coming from Facebook or that Facebook is this low. And so ultimately, don't ask the person. I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but basically don't trust the mediums and what numbers they're giving you.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
I mean, use them as a guidance point because like, for instance, when I'm using Google Analytics and I'm going down to like ad content level to determine whether or not ads were working efficiently based on what Google Analytics is saying, I end up in this hole of like, this really doesn't seem right. And it drives the account incorrectly. But when I use it more as a guiding system for which ad sets are working, which campaigns are working, it's great because I know that Google Analytics is always going to underreport by at least 20%, sometimes way more than that. And so we always recommend Triple Whale, Northbeam, Hyros because these are products which are giving you a secondary viewpoint that isn't biased by a specific medium. They don't care where you're going to spend more money. They don't even care if you spend more money because they're not getting more money to their bottom line by you spending more money. But then you look at Google Analytics, and of course, Google Ads is always performing incredibly well from Google Analytics, and Facebook is always performing terribly, and TikTok is always performing terribly, and LinkedIn's not performing great. And so similarly, Facebook used to have their Facebook Analytics. They don't have that anymore, discontinued it. But when they did, Google didn't look as good as Facebook. And it's a very, it's something you see over and over and over again. It's natural that these platforms would bias their own platform, because inherently the way they make money is by you spending more money. So why wouldn't they bias themselves? So we recommend always using external tools or a blended model where you're taking the data from Facebook, Google Analytics, Google Ads, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, all the places, and then creating a blended average to understand what's going on, so long as it fits into your profit and loss, like what we were talking about before. If the CFO is like, hey, none of this makes any sense, you guys are still reporting over what we actually made in revenue last week, then okay, you can't use that, and you got to up the strictness on your attribution model and make sure that it actually fits. But yeah, I think you almost have to nowadays use some external tool, because it's only getting worse with privacy claims.
Totally. I agree 100%. These platforms are just trying to get relative and directional accuracy. The only things we ever look at as absolutes are what is being spent on marketing and how many sales are we getting that aren't refunded. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Yes.
Nice.
Don't trust the virtue signal of privacy.
Don't trust the virtue signal of privacy. Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Whole nother podcast. Do you have anything else you want to go over?
No, I think that's great.
Amazing. Boom.